Mass Media Demo.
All right, everybody, it's 10:14 p.m. Eastern Time. Our bellies are full of fruit tart and whiskey. And you know what that means? It's time to get our bacon. And they're not full.
They're not full.
They're mostly full of fruit tart.
I didn't have very much fruit tart. I have a toothache.
You have toothache?
I have toothache.
You have toothache? Oh, my love.
That's all right. Internet, don't worry about me.
Yes.
I went to the dentist, got some medication. But
Like a boss.
Like a boss.
I want to say a special thank you to listener Anna T, who did that brand new intro music you just heard.
Yes, very cute.
Oh, love it. Okay, folks, it's Pastry Week. It's Pastry Week.
Pastry week.
Oh, you say potato, I say potato.
Nobody says potato.
Okay. So, a big one. Here's the thing about pastry. It can be like anything.
There's so many things that pastry can be in and on, and all those prepositions. Wink, wink.
So, like today, this morning, I had a cherry turnover for
That's
breakfast.
pastry.
And then, as part of our dinner, we had these little like phyllo dough,
Also pastry.
bites. They were frozen. I don't know. And then also like little, hot dogs wrapped in pastry. And then we had the pastry tart. I mean, it's a wide range of things.
We also had other things for dinner, like vegetables.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought that was clear, but vegetables aren't pastry.
That's true. Unless.
Okay. So pastry is a wide arcing thing. And let's just right off the bat say everybody did so much better this week.
Yes. Oh, the signatures, so much better.
Now, here's what I will say, though, because I observed while we were watching it, Paul Hollywood was in a much better mood.
He really was. I think that it sometimes, and I said this, I was like, sometimes we forget that his job is to be critical, but he did a bad job last week. Really kind of like being judgy, being a judge without being judgy. Right? This week, he was much better at judging for this contest because he would say things like, this isn't quite right, this isn't quite right. But, I mean, I still like it. I'm just not blown away by it.
And I think it's a combination of, like, him being in a better mood, and I think everybody did better this week. But it just seemed like last week, especially for signature, nobody came away looking good, right? And I think he was just, a little harsher last week than this week. So let's talk about everybody's showings. Now, here's the thing. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the episode yet, Linda goes home.
I was so sad. But, I mean, it wasn't like she did great, so she went home. It was like she had a bad week.
Much like, I think Sarah was last week, right?
Yeah, she had a bad week, too.
Literally, Linda's everything. For the signature, she didn't follow the brief, didn't crimp the thing, basically just made samosas.
Yeah,
and
baked samosas, because aren't samosas usually deep fried?
Yes. And then was last in technical. Mm-hmm. And then for the tart, her basket didn't work.
Yep, fell apart.
It
what are you going to do,
XXX. Like, it was, she went home.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Let's start with pasties, hand pies.
Now, it's not pasties.
No.
That's a different thing.
That's different.
So, Peter made some really cute fish pasties.
Yeah, they look so cute, like little fish.
And not just cute, but effective.
Yeah.
Like, there's a shot of, like, Paul Hollywood cutting into it, and it looks like it might be a fish.
Yeah.
Like, it's very good.
A tiny brown flaky
now,
fish.
Now, a little dry, which I think is the reason he didn't get Star Baker this week.
Right. Because I think that everyone was really worried about soggy bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
And
can we all agree now, we're like 11 seasons in, soggy bottom, we don't need to smirk at that anymore. We get it. It kind of sounds like butts, like you got a wet butt or whatever. We get it. There's still, I think it was Mark L. who said soggy bottom. I'm just like, soggy bottom. Like, yes, Mark. We know what it sounds like.
So several bakers put rice in their pasties. So there was the complaint from a lot, what? So it was Peter, David, who else put rice in it?
I'm trying to remember one other person, but yeah, that it was too dry. It's just the rice with the pastry dough.
It just soaks up everything.
Yeah, it's just too dry. But like nobody really whiffed it on the pasties. There was, I think Mark L., who I think of as like Salt and Pepper Mark. Salt and Pepper Mark as opposed to Ginger Mark. Salt and Pepper Mark.
Okay.
Like they were like, yeah, there's not enough filling. It was too pale.
They're like,
yeah, it was just like not impressive. They weren't like, I don't think they were like, oh, you really missed the mark on this one.
Yeah.
It was just like, this isn't it. And I think he would be in the bottom of signature, and Linda's was like, we didn't follow the brief.
Yeah.
And like
everybody else's, there was a little bit of trouble with bake in the way of like it just wasn't dark enough, but nobody's was raw.
Yeah.
And there were some trouble with, Linda didn't even attempt to crimp.
Yeah.
But there were several people who did crimp that lost the crimping in the baking.
Can I say, I am frustrated with Lottie.
Okay.
And I finally have put my finger on what it is.
What is it?
She has a habit, and I don't think it's conscious. I think it's subconscious because it's a thing that I myself know I definitely used to do, and I probably still do sometimes, which is to give yourself preemptive excuses for why something might not turn out okay that's not your fault. And so, like, she did it with the pasty this week where she said, like, I wish it was a little neater, but blah, 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 right? Where then I want to think, like, then make it meaner, and then make it neater.
Yeah, like, everything within this contest is in your control if it's in your hands.
Right.
You know? So, like, for example, Linda tried so hard. She made 3 batches of choux pastry. Never did get it right, but she was always like, this isn't right. I'm going to fix it. Going to work it. Going to do something else. And Lottie is kind of like, looks like I made scrambled eggs again.
Yeah, Lottie just seems to accept, like, when she was working the pasty dough, she said, like, oh, it's getting too soft because it's been out of the freezer too long. It's like, okay.
Then put it in the freezer.
Put it in the freezer. Like, I just feel like she's giving herself excuses, and she's not really pushing herself the way now, week 5, halfway through, I expect people to be doing. And that was frustrating to me. I see a lot of potential in her.
Is this maybe a British self-deprecating sort of personality trait, do you think? Do you think that's what she's doing?
Well, because Ruby, the one who was like a frightened deer, not the other Ruby who won, Tanzo, I think it's the last name, she was always very self-deprecating, but...
No, she didn't win.
Sure?
Frances won that season.
Okay, sure. But she pushed herself the whole time, you know?
Yes.
And she was doing very intricate, very difficult things.
She was constantly apologizing and crying about it, but she pushed herself.
Whereas I think if you look at, for example, like Lottie's pasties, if you didn't have the, like, toed bases underneath, they visually, there was nothing to them. Right, where you have Peters that look like fish. You had Dave who did like the little chilies on them and stuff. People were like trying to do things, and she just didn't seem to push herself with the look of it.
Yeah.
But there were people who they were like, "Oh, this is great." Hermines was great. Mm-hmm. Mark Ginger Marks was great. Mark. And Laura's.
Yeah.
Laura's. Now, here's what I found interesting.
Okay.
No handshakes this week.
Yeah, they said that several bakes were, quote, beautiful, but no handshakes. Oh, I mean, Matt gave a handshake.
But
it doesn't mean anything for him.
I don't think there's been a handshake since, like, the handshake with Lottie in, like, week 3 or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think that this is, like, the whole thing as it gets towards the final, like, things are supposed to get harder.
Yeah.
We're supposed to see less and less handshakes.
And I think
they're supposed to, like, up their criteria.
I think we theorized before, but it might also be just COVID's in everybody's head. You know, maybe like Paul's just thinking a lot more about handshakes, and maybe not saying like he's like, well, I can't shake their hand because of it, but maybe he's just like in his head a little bit more about handshakes in general.
We covered this in Schmanners, actually, and about like how...
Wait, we do another show?
We do another show.
Oh, cool.
About how just the kind of... There's almost like a cultural shift in touching people.
Right.
when epidemics and pandemics and things happen. It's the reason why when Lady Di shook the hand of an HIV positive AIDS patient, like everybody went nuts because she didn't wear gloves.
Yeah.
But it's not transmittable that way.
Good for her.
So she made like a political statement that way. Anyway, listen to Schmanners. It's fun.
It's a great show. So that was Signature. So then we get to Technical. Now, Technical this week, on its surface, seemed a little simple to me, right? Eclairs.
6 eclairs.
That
3
had been a
raspberry, 3 caramel.
Salted caramel. Yeah, that had been a signature or a showstopper before, right?
I think it had been a signature in Martha's year.
Yeah.
And
because somebody made like a Ferris wheel for eclairs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it was also a showstopper when in Nadia's year when they made that like eclair tower. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Yes. Okay, because at first it's like, oh well, this isn't. But then when you look at all the elements that they had to do, right? Whereas like you make the eclair, but you also had to make the creme pat with salted caramel and creme pat with seedless raspberry, and you had to do different kinds of like icing for it and everything. Mm-hmm. It seemed difficult enough.
Yeah. In fact, like I remember seeing some of the shots of the bakers looking through the instructions. They were actually stapled. It was like a book.
Yeah. Let's see who struggled. Well, Linda, of course.
Yeah.
Linda. Here's what I think is the problem. This sometimes, let me say, folks, it's easy to be sitting at home in my comfy chair, knitting a blanket, watching them with all the stress, and it's easy to judge, right? That said, it seemed like what Linda did was the exact same thing 3 times, and each time it didn't work. Yeah. Where I think sometimes people get in their head that like, well, it just magically didn't work, but this time it will magically work. And they even said they kind of breezed past it, but when they like tried her eclairs, they were like, there's obviously no flour in it. It's like, what? And I was like, wait, what? Is that what happened?
You're right. That was a very small, like, second.
Right. And I was like, wait, let's dive into that. Did Linda 3 times leave flour out of her dough? Like, what is happening? But it's and the fact that, and maybe she did try different things, but the fact that they didn't show her doing different things makes me think that it was more just like her going, I don't know why it didn't work. I'll do it again. I don't know why. And
because pastry can be finicky like that, you know?
Sure.
If you don't get it up to the right temperature, if you don't cook it enough. I'm talking about choux. Like if you don't like put enough butter in, or if you leave it too wet, you don't put enough flour in. Obviously, she didn't put enough flour in.
Obviously, according to Mr. Hollywood,
it can be tricky.
And Peter did great. Peter won.
Yep.
Hermine did great. She got second, if I remember correctly. Everybody else, I think, was like, Salt and Pepper Mark was down the bottom. Another one where like it just didn't puff up right, and it just wasn't right.
He had trouble with the bake again.
Yeah, he had an off week, but not a bad week.
As bad as Linda.
Yeah.
What was it Prue said last week? You would just have to not be the worst. Not be the worst.
Yes. Oh, hey, thanks for mentioning Prue. Real quick, just want to give a shout out to Prue Style. I really enjoy it. She had this huge, chunky red bracelet.
It looked almost like it should be a watch.
Yeah, well, she had a yellow watch on the other side. Oh. And then she had this giant, like, almost looked like brass knuckles, but, like, on her wrist.
It was squarish on top, so it was round around her wrist, but the top was very squared off.
And, like, a blue sweater that looked like it almost had, like, a sunset pattern on it.
It was, like, just kind of abstracting.
And, like, a very geometric, like, sphere necklace.
She is always bringing the looks. That's, like, her signature thing.
She has a lot of geometric shapes, a lot of primary colors, and a lot of, like, contrast. It's very like pop art kind of style in clothes. Very chunky and highly visible. Yeah, I love it. Looks great. Let's see. So everybody did okay. I think Peter did well, but there was no, sometimes when you're in the technical, you get it where they're like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what whatever it should be. And I didn't feel like anybody did that.
I mean, again, they were able to communicate their slight, this wasn't quite exactly right without being a bummer,
yes.
Which is good.
So then we get to Showstopper. And Showstopper was interesting to me because it really was like two different challenges. Right? Challenge 1 is fruit tart. Mm-hmm. And then challenge 2 was a separate cage that had to cover it.
Which is what makes the fruit tart like a showstopper design element thing.
Absolutely. I totally get it.
You also do fruit tart for signature, right? And have it still be delicious, but not be a wow factor.
Yeah. Now, 2 people's didn't go well.
Right.
Linda's didn't come off the bowl. Mm-hmm. And Ginger Mark's.
Ginger Mark. He, while talking about it, before he had even destroyed it coming off of the mold.
Yes.
He was
in the presentation of design.
He was like, this is going to be out of flaky pastry.
Yeah.
So
he was like, it's rough puff pastry. It's probably not a good idea, but we'll see if it works. Something along those lines. And I was like, then why didn't you do it?
Yeah. This goes back to our whole thing, right? Because we've talked about the practicing and people are like, well, it's never worked in the time. Well, then do something that does work in the time.
Then simplify. Because I know what's in his head is like, this is difficult to do. So if I nail it, it will show that I can do it. But that also doesn't take into account that because it's difficult to do, the window of success is so much smaller.
Yeah.
That when you're in there and it's stressful and you have all these different things that what I really liked is I felt like Laura used the lattice cutter and did everything right. And I'm not going to say it was a simple design. It wasn't, but it was a very straightforward cage and it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful.
Now, I wonder how we would feel if Ginger Mark had really pulled it out of the hat for this one, right? If it had been amazing and wonderful, and would we be applauding him for his pushing the envelope or whatever?
Well, but here's the thing. I don't think so. Because even if it had worked, I don't think the design itself was that interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of just a sheet of puff pastry with circles cut out.
Yeah, it was going to be half a bottle or something, half a wine bottle over it. But the effect wasn't nearly as impressive. When you had Lottie's pyramid and Dave's pyramid, which I thought were both very effective.
I think one was a 3-sided and one was a 4-sided.
Yeah.
Is that it?
But Lottie's was gorgeous, and very huge. And I found that very impressive. And I just don't think his would have compared to that even if it had worked.
I see. Okay.
I mean, and frankly, same with Linda's. It was colorful, which is great, but the way it was just kind of a draped kind of basket over a bowl.
I really think it would have looked very nice if it had worked. I do want to talk a little bit about Linda's tart. It's a sweet milk tart.
And we won't be calling it by its name, but go on. You looked up the origin of it because Noel was so excited to see it.
Yes. He really, really wanted to try a piece of this tart, you could tell. So the origin story is that it originates in Kent. And that... a rather poor woman herself saw some very skinny children who were traveling and working the fields. And although she was poor, she had a few things in her pantry and made this very simple sugared milk tart for them.
Yes. I also want to talk about Salt and Pepper Mark's Showstopper.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like in a different universe where Linda had nailed all 3 or even 2 out of the 3, we would be talking about Mark in the same way because he did not do well in technical. He did not do well in signature. And the Showstopper, they were like, this is good, but your base doesn't match this thing. The chocolate didn't go all the way to the edge.
Yeah, they were like, this tastes okay, this main chocolate stuff, but you really didn't think through the thickness of the base and the presentation, and like I feel like they were grasping really hard to try and find something that they did like about it.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of things that they did not like about it.
That they were not wild about.
Yeah.
Which I agree. So, in the end, Linda goes home.
Yeah.
And it's been a bit of a roller coaster with old Lynn, where, I've said before, I thought she was for sure gone second week, and then she stuck around, and then we liked her more and more.
I liked her so much for the final. I thought that she was like right up there, cool, calm, collected. She was like doing her thing, finding her groove, and then she had a really bad week.
Yeah, it did kind of seem like she was like picking up steam and getting it together, and then this week it was just falling flat. And Laura won, which I was very happy. Got Star Baker.
We were talking about how she seemed to be chasing that star, that dream of Paul Hollywood likes my bakes.
Yes.
And I think that although she did mention Paul a couple times, she used his rough puff pastry recipe for her pasties. And what else did she do with Paul? Like, she knows that he really likes key lime pie.
Oh, yeah, did the key lime pie, which was a slam dunk.
Yeah. So, although she was still, she's after Paul. She wants Paul's approval real bad.
Very much so.
She did it. She pulled it off this week. She did great.
And I thought she let me start off. All three of the challenges, she did great. I think she really deserved that. I don't know that she has moved into potential finals territory for me, because while she did really well this week, I don't have any other data points that point towards like gaining success. So I'm open to the idea of it if next week she also like stands and delivers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Now, what I do find interesting, what I realized watching, is I don't remember this happening before, but I'm sure it has. But even if it has, it's very rare. We have not had any repeat Star Bakers so far in the first half.
Yeah. I feel like there are a couple of seasons in there where like Richard, he gets Star Baker like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, Ian got it like 3 times.
Ian got it a few times in a row. Not in a row, though, I think.
No, but there was like Rahul did like 4 times over the course of the season.
There were a lot of them that kind of just like were steps above the other ones for a while. But, Ian didn't win. Richard didn't win.
True.
Rahul did win.
Now, so far this year, we had week 1 was Peter. Mm-hmm. Week 2 was Dave. Mm-hmm. Week 3 was Salt and Pepper Mark. Mm-hmm. Week 4 was was Ginger Mark. Mm-hmm. And now this week was Laura.
Yeah.
Right? So the people who still haven't gotten it are Hermine and
Which
Lottie.
They really liked this week as well. I feel like she was very, very high up there for Star Baker.
Sometimes they do this thing in the recap where they like say whenever they're like, well, it could be this person who goes home, this person could be Star Baker. This week they said 5 out of the 8 that could be Star Baker, and it's like, okay, you guys, this means nothing. But so I think of the 7 that remain, Lottie and Hermine are the only 2 who haven't gotten Star Baker yet.
I think you're right. But Lottie got a handshake. Did Hermine get a handshake too?
No, not that I remember.
But Lottie did, for sure.
Okay, so now we're going to move into the discussion of potential finals, because I've really lost steam on Lottie.
Yeah, me too.
She has at best like leveled out. She is at best. But she has had some downward. Now, I'll tell you who I do like. Ginger Mark.
Yeah.
Ginger Mark's growing on me. Mm-hmm. Peter, still consistent, right?
Yep.
Like, I feel like Peter is going to make it to the finals, and if he has a good week, could win it.
Yes, I agree.
I think he would have been Star Baker this week if his pasty hadn't been a little dry, right? Other than that, it was, like, pretty picture perfect. So I'm going to say Mark L.
Okay.
That's Ginger Mark. And Peter. And I'm open to Laura. The idea of, like, I've seen Laura steadily improve in a way that I'm like, oh, if that keeps going, slam dunk.
I think that I would toss up Hermine and Laura.
Here's the thing about Hermine that I find worrying, but not necessarily damning.
Okay.
Which is she has a tendency to say at the beginning of each episode, like, I'm not good at this one. I'm looking forward to this. So, like, in this week, she was like, I can do pastry. And last week, she was like, I really can't do chocolate. Where I kind of feel like as challenges move on, as the episodes move on, they have a tendency to mix and match things a lot more.
Yeah.
Especially in the final episode.
Oh, they always pick the final where, like, everybody, like in Nadia's year, where they're like, they had to do pastry again. And she was like, this is it. They put pastry in because all of us did really poorly at pastry. Yeah.
And so that is the only thing that worries me is she doesn't seem to have the same kind of... she seems to have a lot of depth in her knowledge, not as much width. Mm-hmm. Where, like, I always think about Nancy with that, where Nancy just seemed to know about, like, she'd pick up a technical and be like, well, I've never made this before, but this thing I know about this, and this thing I know about this, and you have to be careful. And it's like, okay. And Peter kind of seems that way to me, where I've yet to see Peter come up against something where he was like, I'm drawing an absolute blank.
Yeah.
Right. So Peter seems very consistent. But yeah, Hermine did so good this week.
She did.
Now, what's going to be interesting? Well, sorry. So what is your, like, final three right now?
Ditto.
Yeah.
Ditto.
They mentioned, just very briefly at the end of this episode, I think it was Salt and Pepper Mark, said next week is Japanese week?
Yeah.
And maybe I misheard that, but if that's true, that's brand new and it's very exciting.
I feel like I have seen a lot of Japanese baking on, like, Instagram, because it's very, very clean looking. It always looks very tasty and delicious and sometimes quite cute.
Yeah.
That's the kawaii, right? Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to that. Mostly, also, just I always like whenever there's a new challenge, a new week, because it's like, okay, literally we can pick anything for the thing. Like, we don't have to dig deep into, like, weird challenges. We can say, like, make this thing. And it's like what you think of when you think of that thing. And it's very exciting to me.
They did, let's see, they've done sugar-free week.
I really like the Elizabethan one.
Elizabethan? No, Victorian.
Victorian. Sorry,
they
that's
did
what I meant.
Victorian week. They've done botanical week. They've done gluten-free week. They did vegan week. I'm sure there's
other ones. But yeah, all in all, I thought that this was a little bit more uplifting as far as at the end. I was like, maybe these people are actually good at baking.
Yeah.
Where last week, I think I was like, wait, what if they're all bad at this?
I think you actually said that.
I know. I think maybe it was just a rough week.
Yeah. Yeah. This was one of the ones that I would be very happy to just put on in the background of my life, go throughout my day, enjoy the very subtle sounds of whisking and, temperature checking and all those kind of things, and just, chill about it.
Now, here's what I will say before we wrap up. If this is your first time watching a season of Great British Bake Off, and maybe it is, it's a perfect example. There is the sequence where everyone is removing their cages off of, like, their molds and bowls and stuff, where it is a completely unforced, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the camera shots and the music doesn't help, but it's very, like, real tense.
Yeah.
Teresa had to leave the room, I can't remember why, and I had to pause it because I was like, I can't watch this without her. And I'm so worried about something terrible happening.
It's a very naturally dramatic experience.
Right. Very empathetically, like, ooh. Same with, like, last week where they cut into, like, Sarah's thing and it was completely raw and we both, like, gasped in pain.
Yeah.
It's, like, so empathetic, and it's not like, I watch a lot of baking competition shows, and there's a lot of them where it's just like, I just don't know if we're going to finish it. And they're like, very clearly a producer leaned in and was like, hey, could you say, like, I'm worried we're not going to finish it, and we'll do, like, a dramatic zoom. And this is a lot more of just, like, it is tense to watch people pull things off a mold. It's
because
scary.
We've all been there. If you've baked anything, if you have pulled anything out of the oven, and it turns out how you did not expect it to go, we've all felt that feeling.
Yes, absolutely. All right. You know what? Enough from us. That's it. We'll be back for next week. Teresa, what's the preposition?
Bake upon.